Hello everyone and welcome to my first ever Q&A. About a week or so ago I hit 400 subscribers and asked you guys to ask me any question you wanted unless it was too personal. And you guys definitely delivered because I ended up getting more questions than I was initially expecting. I have them all on my phone ready to answer, so without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first question comes from Orich Entertainment, or Oririch Entertainment. I apologise if I've butchered the pronunciation of that. But his question simply is, do you have any tips? There are very general tips that I can give you. Always wash behind your ears when you're in the shower, or always look both ways when crossing the road. No, I'm only joking. Obviously, he's probably referring to the channel. It's kind of hard coming up with tips for doing a YouTube channel because it's, especially nowadays, it's mostly a sense of hit and miss whether your stuff does well or not. Like, I'm just grateful and lucky that my videos, or some in particular, have done as well as they have done. I suppose the best tip I can give for anyone who is wanting to do something similar to what I'm doing in terms of doing a YouTube channel is probably to just keep doing the thing you want to do. Like, if you have a specific mindset of what you want to do with your channel and where you want to take it, just keep doing that thing until you hit a rhythm that works well, and a rhythm that for you and that works well with a specific audience. And eventually you will start to find something that connects to people, and that's when the subscribers and the views go up. So the best advice I can give is just don't give up and just keep going. The next question is from Megspace, who is a friend of mine, and she simply asks me to rank my short films that I've made from favourite to least favourite. When I first saw this question, I knew it was going to be tricky. Because I've made quite a few short films over the years, it's going to be quite a hard list to do because my opinion has changed on a few specific short films that I've made, and I do like some more than others. I think overall I've made about 7. So yeah, if we're going from what she's saying, starting with my favourite, I would say my favourite short film that I've made is Curiosity, purely because the whole thing was improvised, but the end product doesn't feel improvised in the slightest. It feels very tight, very, well, it just feels like a very tightly knit package. In terms of how it's acted, how it's edited, how it's shot. And a lot of people that I talk to don't realise it was improvised until I tell them it was. And I do, out of all the films that I've made, I do feel that that one flows the best out of all the short films that I made, and I just feel like it's the slickest, snappiest, and most to-the-point short film that I've made, which is why I probably prefer it the most compared to the others, because some of the other short films I've done do meander a little bit. My second favourite would have to be Breathing Space, which is the most recent short film that I did, which I think was back in March of this year. That one is my second favourite purely because again, that was another improvised short film. We only had a very basic idea when going into it, and what we got as an end product was pretty damn impressive. We did it all in long takes, which again was a first for me, because doing long takes of scenes and shots is something that I always try to kind of one-up myself with each time I do a film. And this one, it's literally just 3 long takes all put together, so that's kind of the icing on the cake in terms of that. Next up would probably be, it would probably be Easy Targets, because even though there is a lot that I could change about Easy Targets and a lot that I could probably go back and do a lot better, I still am quite proud of it, especially considering it was an idea that I didn't think I would get made, but I ended up getting it made. And even though, again, there are a lot of things that I could change about it, and would do a lot better now, I'm still happy with how it turned out. The ending, I'm not so happy with, but there are certain moments in that film that I'm really proud of. And the fact that everyone that I asked to be in it came together and delivered an end product that was better than it really should have been, again, just makes me, just always notches Easy Targets up for me every time that I rewatch it. Because, yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of the dark horse out of all the short films that I've made. Next up would probably be Lost, which seems to be like a bit of a fan favourite with the people that have seen it. And don't get me wrong, I do like a lot of the things in it. Again, that was another thing that was completely improvised on the day, and for what it was, it turned out pretty damn well. Yeah, I mean, there isn't really much I can say about Lost. It's a simple comedy sketch that worked out better than it should have, and it was enjoyable to film, and it was an even more enjoyable project to bring out to you guys. So yeah, that's probably the next one down the list. And now we're at the bottom two. I would say that the second to last one would probably be In Memory. Because even though it was the first short film I made, and it's not the most technically impressive one that I've done, I'm still really proud with what I was able to do in such a short frame of time, because believe it or not, I only had about less than a week to film the whole thing and even to edit it, I think, if I remember rightly. But yeah, I had such an incredibly short time frame to film it, edit it, and get it finished, because it was actually a project for college, for a college, assignment. And considering that I got it done in such a short space of time, especially compared to what everyone else had, because they had like several weeks to do their projects, but because I was so busy helping everyone else with theirs, I kind of limited the amount of time that I had to spend on mine, which is why I only had like less than a week to do everything for mine. And considering all that, I think the end product is still really, really good. Again, on a technical aspect, it's not the best of my short films. If anything, it's filmed the worst, especially in terms of the camera quality and audio and all that. But there's just like a certain feel to that film, and especially with the context of how it was made, I just have a soft spot for it. And my least favourite, even though it is the one that won an award at my uni, and is the one that kind of has the most personal message out of all my films, because it's something that I do have myself, which is Asperger's, and the film tackles that. I have to go with Sensory as my least favourite, purely because the whole concept of that film, I know I can do a lot better. I feel like the product that I ended up making was like the rough version of the idea I was trying to do. I feel like now, with the skills that I've learned and with better camera equipment and sound design skills, etc., I can do that idea a lot better. The next question is from Nos Felix Culpa. Again, I apologise if I butchered that name. But the question simply is, would you ever consider reviewing more anime or that focus on works within a specific company, such as watching and reviewing the biggest productions from Kyoto Animation, etc.? Yes, I want to do that a bit more. I mean, like I said last year, and it's kind of a recurring thing that I keep saying, I do want to try and review more anime. Sometimes I don't necessarily give myself enough time or have enough time to sit down and watch a full-on anime to be able to review, especially if it's a series. But if it's a film, slightly different story. Just sit down, watch the film, and then get a review out for it. But no, I do definitely want to broaden my horizons when it comes to reviewing more anime, because at the moment, what I did last year was fine, and I got quite a few anime reviews out during that marathon that I did. But I think focusing on a specific company's work might be a good way of approaching it, especially with Kyoto Animation, because like I loved A Silent Voice. Like A Silent Voice might just be one of my favorite anime films, like full stop, because of how beautiful the animation was and how heartbreaking the story was and how well it used the characters. I mean, if you've seen my review for A Silent Voice, you will know how much I love that film. The next question is from NMW222, and they ask, basic question, but if you had a film based on your life, who would play you and what would it focus on? Now, I don't know who would play me, but I could definitely answer the second part of that question. I think it would focus on my transition from college to university, because I feel like that was a bit more of a drastic transition in my eyes than going from secondary school to college. And I feel like it would focus on that transition as well as my time at uni, because I feel like my time at uni was the most stressful compared to college and secondary school. So I feel like it would focus on that specific period, but kind of focusing more on how all of that affects someone with Asperger's, because believe it or not, I do have Asperger's. So I feel like that would be a good way to, because I feel like you could do a lot of creative things in terms of telling the story and how you film that in terms of someone with Asperger's going through this transitional phase and how it affects them mentally. So that's what the film would be about. I know it would have a cracking soundtrack, that's for sure. In terms of who would play me, I don't know. I want to say Ryan Gosling because I love Ryan Gosling, but that's just not realistic. I guess if I had to go with a more realistic answer, I would say I have two names in my head, either Daniel Radcliffe or George McKay, who most of you will probably know from 1917. I feel like either of those two would be a decent fit. I don't know anyone who would specifically fit the role of me like to a T, but I feel like those would be the closest you'd get. These next three questions are from Bethany W. The first one is, what is your favourite sequel of all time, and what sequel do you think is better than the first? Doesn't have to be the same film. Oh, that is a tough one. Favourite sequel of all time? I'd probably have to go with something. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't know if this would be my favourite, but I mean, the one that first comes to mind is probably something, simple like Terminator 2, or even like Die Hard with a Vengeance, because Die Hard with a Vengeance is actually, I think, my favourite Die Hard film. And I know the original is a classic, but Die Hard with a Vengeance is probably my favourite sequel, especially in the Die Hard series. In regards to the second part of the question, which sequel do you think is better than the first film? I definitely have to go with probably the Captain America sequels, because the first movie is fine. It's enjoyable when you're watching it, but to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, especially in regards to the MCU, I don't really remember much about the first Captain America. Like I said, it's an entertaining time when you're watching it, but I really don't remember much outside of it. Winter Soldier and Civil War, on the other hand, just kind of upped the stakes with each film and just improved every single aspect with each of the sequels, to the point where Civil War is one of my favourite MCU films. Bethany's second question is, what is your favourite episode of The Goes Wrong Show by Mischief Theatre, and was there any moment or scene in the series that you didn't see coming or expect to happen? suppose I should really give you guys a bit of context, because I know quite a lot of you probably haven't seen The Goes Wrong Show. The Goes Wrong Show is basically a TV show that was on the BBC, I think, at the back end of last year or the very start of this year. And it's created by the people who make The Play That Goes Wrong, which is this hilarious play in the West End, and I think in Broadway as well, where the whole joke is the fact that it's an amateur dramatics company trying to do a serious play, but everything is going wrong. That's kind of the whole premise of it, and it does sound like something that would get old very quickly if they did a TV show off of that premise, but trust me, The Goes Wrong Show is hands down one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I was in hysterics with every single episode, and there is not a single bad episode. Every episode in that show is fantastic, and I cannot wait for series 2. So yeah, that's just a bit of context. My favourite episode probably has to be 90 Degrees, just because of what they're able to do with not just the set, but there is a few specific word puns in that episode, which are... oh my god, they're so bloody funny. But yeah, 90 Degrees is probably my favourite episode. In terms of anything that I didn't expect to happen, I guess, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's like, I think it's like a Georgian style one. You might want to correct me if I'm wrong there. But there's basically this one bit where they are all sat down about to eat dinner, and the ceiling fan just suddenly starts to lower itself, and they're still trying to act out the scene while lowering themselves in their chairs like this, trying not to get their heads cut off. And it's really simple, but really, really funny. But yeah, I genuinely didn't see that coming. And the last question from Bethany is, what are your predictions of what might happen after Alien Covenant and what they might have planned for the next film? That's an interesting question, because considering where Alien Covenant left off and what it did in the film, it's getting harder and harder for it to set up for the original Alien, because Prometheus and Alien Covenant are both prequels to the original Alien. And I don't know, the way that the story went in Alien Covenant and the way it ended, I just don't know. I don't quite know how they're going to make sure that it perfectly fits back up with the original Alien. I suppose my prediction of what could happen is David's got the embryos of the aliens on board the ship, and it could crash on LV-426, which is the planet they visit in the 1979 original Alien. So it could crash land there, and then something could happen. I don't know. It's all rather confusing at this point, because certain things that need to happen for the original Alien to work haven't quite happened yet. And any things that were set up in either Prometheus or Alien Covenant that could have led to a perfect, like, fitting in of jigsaw pieces for it all to work for the original Alien kind of got thrown out the window, and they kind of went in their own direction, and now they kind of have to backtrack on themselves or try and think of a new way to try and make it work as a prequel. The next question is from Sawyer Sable, who asks, what are your 3 favourite years in movie history and why? Now, this is an interesting question, because that kind of thing of choosing like a favourite year for movies is something that I, believe it or not, do think about quite a lot, because every so often I'll just randomly Google a specific year and see what movies came out in said year, and I'll kind of be going like, damn, that was a really good year for movies. So in terms of answering this question, it's fairly straightforward, because I think I already know what 3 years I would choose. There are 2 in particular that kind of sprung to mind immediately. But I will do them in reverse order, so the most recent year and then going back. So the first year that came to mind was 2014, because especially in terms of recent years, That year had so many brilliant movies, to the point where, like, if I was doing my channel back then, I don't think I could have done a top 10 for the year. It would have to be like a top 20 or a top 25 at least, just to fit in. So, there were so many great movies. I mean, like, you had Whiplash, you had Gone Girl, Birdman, Mommy, which is one of my favourite movies of all time, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Paddington, the Lego movie, Boyhood. There's so many brilliant films. The next year that I would choose would probably be 1994, because again, that was a very strong year with a load of classic releases. You had The Lion King, you had Pulp Fiction, you had The Shawshank Redemption, and Forrest Gump all going head to head at the Oscars. You had Speed, which is, an iconic action movie in its own right. You had The Crow, you had The Mask, you had Leon the Professional, and I think you also had the last two entries in the Three Colours trilogy. So yeah, 1994, brilliant year. My last choice in regards to one of my favourite years in movie history would probably be 1975. Yeah, I'm taking it all the way back now. Because, again, similar to the last 2 years, the amount of high profile releases in this year is unparalleled to quite a few other years that I could have chosen from. Because, like, 1985 was another good one that I could have chosen. 1995 was another one that I was thinking about doing. But I had to go with 1975 purely because the amount of classic, iconic, great movies that came out in this one year is unparalleled in terms of, especially like if you're comparing it to the last 2 years I chose, 1994 and 2014. It's similar to them in terms of the releases that you had. Like, you had Jaws, you had the Rocky Horror Picture Show, you had Monty Python and the Holy Grail, you had Dog Day Afternoon, which, my God, if you have never seen Dog Day Afternoon, you need to change that, because it is such a brilliant movie and is, in my opinion, Al Pacino's best performance. Like, I know there's Heat, there's the Godfather films, there's the Scarface, but at this point in time, Dog Day Afternoon has, without a doubt, my favourite Al Pacino performance. And that paired with Sidney Lumet's brilliant direction, it's just watch Dog Day Afternoon. If you take anything away from this video, just do yourself a favour and watch Dog Day Afternoon. It's a brilliant movie. The next question is from the Mighty Nim, and he simply asks, is The Last Jedi still as good as you remember, or has your opinion evolved since? My opinion on it definitely has changed. I still like the movie, but since it came out, the issues that I have with the film and the plot holes that are evident in the movie have become more noticeable over time. I've seen the movie twice, I think, once in the cinema and one more time since then. And even, like, putting rewatches aside, just as time has passed, certain issues with the film have become more evident to me, and my opinion on it has slightly downgraded since I saw it for the first time. I still think it's a decent film. It's beautifully shot. It has some of the best singular scenes in any Star Wars movie. But as a whole package, there are just certain things that don't quite work well. I know I gave it a 9, I think, when it first came out, but I think looking back at it, it's probably nearer a 7. Or, like a 6.5 or a 7, if I was reviewing it now, anyway. Next up, we have Corey's Reviews, who asks 6 questions. Blimey. So this might take a while, but I will try to get through them all. His first question is, in your eyes, what is the criteria required for you to consider a film a masterpiece? Now, I kind of have 2 ways of looking at this specific question, because there are 2 ways I can grade a movie as a masterpiece. The first one is if the movie has done everything it's set out to do in the best way possible that it can do said thing, whilst maybe including a few things that you maybe weren't expecting, then that, in my opinion, grants it as a masterpiece. Again, one of the best examples that I have of that is Dog Day Afternoon, a movie that is based off of a real event that executes everything that it tries to do in the best possible way that it can do it. Therefore, that is why I think that movie is a masterpiece. It does everything it sets out to do in the best way that it can do that in almost every aspect. The other criteria that I do take into account for some specific films, and again, this varies depending on the film, and the second criteria is that if a movie can have a lasting impact on me and can have me thinking about it long after it's finished, then again, I feel like that also does, over time, grant it the status of masterpiece, in my opinion. I don't like throwing that word around a lot, but if a movie can do either of those two things, then I think it kind of has the right to have that status. If it can do both at the same time, then I feel like it definitely cements it being a masterpiece. The best example that I can think of, especially one that I've seen recently, is Before Sunrise. It's a movie that manages to do both of those things. In terms of executing what it is trying to set out to do, it does it in the best possible way it can do said thing. But also, I was thinking about the movie for months after I'd seen it. Corey's second question is, what is your criteria to determine whether or not a movie is worth purchasing on Blu-ray? Do you purchase Blu-rays just to fill your shelf, or do you only go after Blu-rays you think are worth it? I never buy a Blu-ray just to fill the shelf. I never do that. I always buy a Blu-ray with the intention of watching it at some point. It might not be immediately as soon as I get home and I've bought it in a shop. I might not necessarily get around to watching it on that day, but I always buy a Blu-ray with the intention of watching it at some point, because I feel there are some movies out there where if I don't own a physical copy of it, then it just makes me kind of procrastinate on that movie a bit more. For example, if there's a classic that everyone's been telling me to watch, and I don't own a physical copy of it, or it's not like there in front of me able to watch, and it is available on streaming sites as an example, then that kind of makes me procrastinate on watching it a bit more. Whereas if I have a physical copy of that film, then it kind of pushes me a little bit more to get round to viewing that film at some point. His next question is, are there any movies you loved but acknowledge aren't that good, or are there any movies you thought were really well made but didn't find yourself enjoying to watch? In terms of the first part of that question, yes, I have I suppose this is a bit of a cheap answer, but it's the best answer I can think of, and that is Samurai Cop. I love this movie so much. It's absolutely hilarious. However, if you're grading that movie purely from how it's made, then it has to get like a 0 or an F, because it is so badly made. There are so many continuity errors and editing mistakes. It's like the 90s version of The Room. Nothing about it is particularly good, like in terms of filmmaking or craftsmanship, but it is so bloody funny and so entertaining to watch that I loved every minute of it, despite how bad it was. In terms of the opposite of that, though, a movie that I thought was well made but didn't find yourself enjoying it, I have a very easy answer for that. And I know there's going to be some hardcore film lovers out there that are going to kind of hate what I'm about to say, but Federico Fellini's 8.5. I watched that about a couple months ago, and I had trouble trying to enjoy it, which is a shame because I went into it wanting to love it. It's a movie that is regarded by many as like one of the greatest films ever made. I mean, it's a film about filmmaking, for crying out loud. It was practically gift wrap for me. I should have loved this movie. But I got halfway through it and was like, I am not enjoying this. I'm having trouble trying to invest myself in this film. I think on a technical aspect, it is brilliantly well shot, well made, the sound design, music, all that, the acting, it's all fantastic. But I just thought, personally, it was a little bit on the pretentious side. Corey's next question is, what was your favourite movie as a child, and how do you feel it holds up today? Simple answer, because my favourite movie as a child is still one of my favourite movies now, and that is The Emperor's New Groove. It's my favourite Disney film purely because of how funny it is and how very cleverly written it is. And yes, it still holds up because it's one of those rare movies that was a favourite of mine as a kid where I watched it to death, and is a favourite of mine now, more grown up, and I still watch it to death. The next question is, what is the scariest movie you've ever seen? I would say I have two, kind of, for this. My first option would probably be something along the lines of The Exorcist, maybe. I know it's kind of a generic thing to say because for a long time it was kind of tagged as the scariest movie ever made. And even though there are certain aspects of that film that are a little bit dated, it still is an incredibly creepy film and genuinely unsettled me, and to the point even kind of scared me a bit when I first watched it. But yeah, that definitely, I think that is definitely one of them. Another one that I wouldn't necessarily say scared me, but unsettled me enough to the point where it was actually starting to get under my skin more than most other films would. And I would probably say was scaring me for that very reason, would be Midsummer, which I only got round to watching recently, like a couple months ago. But if I'd seen it last year, then it probably definitely would have made my favourite movies of 2019 list. Because I love how it's shot. I love almost everything about the movie from a presentation standpoint. And there are some specific moments in that film that unsettled me so much and got so under my skin that I would say it scared me in a certain way, like to an extent. The next question is from Milo Kane, who asks, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years? I mean, at this rate, with lockdown and me not getting a job whatsoever, I have no idea where I will be in 5 years, let alone 2. But, I mean, in an ideal world, if things were going according to plan, I would like to somehow get into the film or media industry. I'd like to do writing or directing, or even acting, if that is a route that can get me to other areas. So I don't really know. This is a bit of a tough question. I think in 5 years I'd like to see myself going somewhere down the path that I want to go down, whether that be like at the very bottom of the ladder, but at least I'm on that path. In 10 years' time, I want to be a little bit further up the path and doing stuff that I want to do, making and creating things that I have wanted to make for some time now. And in 15 years, I want to be at the same stage I was in 10 years' time, but just kind of perfecting what I was doing. The final question is from Tom Humphreys, who says, hi Aaron, long-time fan here. Will you be reprising your role as Luke Dorman in the third Source movie? Thanks, keep up the good work. Thank you for that, Tom. Again, I probably have to give the majority of you guys a bit of context for that question. So there is a friend of mine called Ben Ramsey, who I went to college with, and some of you may know from some of the previous videos I've done on this channel. He was on the recent Doctor Who list video that I did. He's been in a couple of my short films like Curiosity and Easy Targets. And back when we were at college, which was roughly 2015, 2016, he made these two short films called The Source and The Source 2 Code Red. And we had fun filming them at the time, but they really aren't that great, like when you look back at them now. But they're kind of like they're kind of like inside jokes within our friend group from that time. And we enjoy just going back every so often and revisiting it and laughing at it because of how bad it is. But basically, those two films, I played a very important character in both of those films called Luke Dorman, who kind of acted as the main character's boss and mentor to an extent. And in the second film, spoiler alert, I die. And we've tried to get Ben, ever since 2016 when The Source Code Red came out, to try and make a third one, just to round it off, the whole series. But as far as I'm aware, he doesn't want to make a third one. I don't know, it's basically down to Ben at the end of the day. If he wants to make a third one, he'll make a third one. If he doesn't, then he won't. He's kind of moved on to better things since then. But yeah, if the opportunity arose, I would love to play Luke Dorman again. It was quite a fun time playing that character, especially for the films that he was in. If there was ever an opportunity to play that character in maybe a different short film, or that was not related to the source, but like maybe just playing Luke as a cameo, so to speak, that would be kind of cool. So I'm just throwing that idea out there if anyone wants to do that. But yeah, if the opportunity arose, I would love to play him again. But as far as I'm aware, there is no Source 3 happening. So guys, that was my first ever Q&A. Thank you again for 400 subscribers. It means so much to me. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.